Hi, Mitchell Levy here, and we are at one of the most exciting parts of my day, and that is talking to somebody who is super cool. In this particular case, not just super cool, but a peer member of the 100 Coaches, Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, who also believes in, figures on, works on values. So we're in for a very cool conversation. Robert Glazer, so glad.
Thanks for having me, Mitchell.
Absolutely welcome. And my first question, I'll toss it over the fence. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, a lot of answers to that. I guess first and foremost, I'm a father to three wonderful children and a husband. I've started several different businesses. I am sort of a perpetual entrepreneur. As part of growing one of those businesses, Acceleration Partners, which I started about 14 years ago and is grown to about 350 people this year. I became passionate about leadership and culture and trying to build a company that was very different from some of the companies that I had been part of. And we've done some cool things and done some things differently, and along the way started writing about those experiences and talking about them and some of the things that we had done to make our company different, including being fully virtual for 14 years. And that sort of blossomed into a night and weekend career, writing some books and doing some speaking. So I've actually recently stepped back from the CEO role to the founder of the board, and we continue to grow the company and spending time kind of developing the next generation of leaders, both inside the business and out of it.
That is awesome. So, by the way, I love it that you start with father. Tell me about fatherhood.
It's hard. I got a sick kid home today. my my wife's away on a flight delayed 3 hours. Yeah, it's funny. The last couple of years have gone fast with COVID, and I have one in college, one in high school, one about to be in high school. And I'm making my priority right now is a lot of his kind of flexibility and be able to do anything anywhere that they're willing to do. I know I have a few more years where they want to do stuff with me, and well, particularly while I'm paying for it. So that's a big focus. And again, kind of thinking of them as also as leaders and helping them figure out who they are and how they can be the best version of themselves, which is three totally different human beings.
Nice. So, what is the best thing you've done with either all three kids or in particular?
I think travel and adventure. I mean, each year I try to do something with each of them, but that time, we actually took all of the kids to Puerto Rico after the hurricane, a couple months after a few years ago, and did some community service down there in the middle of, it was still, everything we saw was basically destroyed. And that was just, I think, really impactful. I think, living where we do and how we do, and you talk about, oh, finish your food. There's other people, or, don't have food to eat or a place to stay. I mean, actually seeing what we saw there and going as a family and working on that sort of reinforces our a lot of our family kind of values. So, we really focus with our kids on understanding the world, learning different perspectives, understanding that, we're very lucky, and hope they kind of carry that generosity forward.
All right. So, by the way, I love that. Very cool. What are those values that you're trying to impart on your kids, or maybe trying is not the right word? What are those values that you have imparted on your kids?
Yeah, we have them up on the wall. We kind of voted on them as a family years ago. So it's be respectful, be responsible. I'm missing be respectful, be responsible, be resilient, and be kind.
Nice. What does being kind mean to you?
I think there's probably multiple versions of kind. I think there is kind to yourself in some cases. Interestingly enough, I think there's being, kind to others. But one of the things I always stress is just never, even in difficult situations, I just think there's never, this is a value we carry in our work too, under a different name, embrace relationships. There's just never a reason to be a jerk or try to make someone feel bad or try to make them feel bad about themselves. Like I just don't think there's any place or need for that. Look, and sometimes being kind is telling someone they don't want to hear. It's not all rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah. By the way, I appreciate that. That actually is a great statement. Let's focus on that for a second.
Yeah.
And I want to echo that back. So I always feel the importance of when somebody really asks a question to give the answer. I mean, the real answer, not the fabricated, oh yeah, you look great answer. Unless of course it's your spouse, and then you don't do that. But no, I'm just kidding. The thing is, I'm always a big feel when people say, hey, how do I show up? I mean, how do I, Mitchell, I get this, how do I show up credibly? And then I spend time focusing on that. Yeah. But I make sure that we've had enough of a conversation so they're ready to hear my answer. And, and so, but I'm going to say, I love the concept of me thinking I'm being kind by telling the truth. That's very cool.
Yeah. Look, I always say there's people in your life who tell you exactly what you want to hear. I'm not one of those. Like, I think people know if you call me, like I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not. Look, I've heard people get off calls and say, yeah, that's terrible, whatever, and so, and hang up the call and then turn to me and be like, can you believe that? I totally don't agree with what it's like, well, that's not very authentic to tell people that. So, I think, look, the truth is not always easy to hear, but I would rather know the truth from people. But one of my personal core values is respectful authenticity, right? And I think that so what I think I see, and that was a unique combination, and it's how we've operated some things in our organization too, because I see two different things. I see disrespectful authenticity, which is sort of Kim Scott's obnoxious aggression, if you follow her work. But then she other has this category called ruinous empathy, and so I see a lot of people on the flip side of that just aren't authentic, but are respectful. I don't know. I think I've always improved and gotten better by the combination of those things.
It's really fascinating. It's interesting to me. My last 3 executive coaching clients, the first words out of their mouth is Mitchell, I think I could do this myself, which is fascinating. And then they go, except I'm bringing you on board because I know you're going to tell me what I don't want to hear.
Yeah. I love the people who tell, like, I generally in the different in both coaches, advisors, or whatever, I've sort of moved away from yes people, and not. I mean, one of the best people I've ever worked with has twice told me, a friend, Philip McKernan, I've talked about it. Like he's twice said, after I told him something, he's like, yeah, that's a really interesting story that you're telling yourself, but I think it's complete bullshit. And, you may want to ponder on that. And I did. And actually I got some incredible insights about why I was telling myself that story in my head. And, Philip is just a guy who cares deeply about people, but is super direct. And again, I've had more, I appreciate him for that, and have probably gained more out of that relationship of being honest, where other people were just platitudes.
That's so cool. So you've been really successful with your business. And once again, I will say successful so far, only potentially.
We've had a good run. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me why.
I think we did things differently. I also think that we were clear about who we are and who we weren't. I think when we really boil down our core values as a company 10 years ago, that's when everything started coming together. And we said, look, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. This is why I always say, like, if someone comes to our organization and it doesn't work out, I would hope they would say something like, well, I'm a to use a sports analogy, like I'm a throwing quarterback and this team just runs and it's not for me. Right? I hope they won't say that they realize that they're not a fit for what we are. Not that we said that we were something that we weren't, because we try to be really consistent between what we think, what we say, and what we do. And again, it's not for everyone. I think our culture is for 1 or 2% of the people, and we spend a lot of work trying to find them. I'm not pretending we're a great place to work for everyone, but I think we're an extraordinarily great place to work for a certain type of individual who aligns to our values.
Now, I might have heard this before, but maybe I didn't. It was so simple. Be consistent with what you think, say, and do. Do you hire for that?
Yeah. I mean, our hiring is pretty robust. We focus on, it's 50-50. We focus on, is the person a fit for the values? Because if there's not fit for the values, then there's no job that will work. And then can they do the job that we need them to do? And I think those are equally important. But again, you can tell when people align it. Like, we have a core value of own it. And there's people that are very clearly, aligned to that. And then there's people who we've hired, over the 14 years where something goes wrong. And one of the things that we do is we write these kind of after action reports and analyze, hey, what went wrong? What do we learn from it? And you'll read this report and it's like, it was all external things that we couldn't control. And I can tell you in 5 minutes that person's not going to be with our company in 6 months, because someone else works on a team where the company went bankrupt overnight, out of nowhere. And they'll list all the warning signs we could have looked at, or things that we could have done better, or processes that maybe we want to fix for next time. Like, it's just a real difference in the manifestation of own it. And so I think we try to be consistent around that. I've always loved the think, stay, and do, because it's just so exhausting to think one thing, say one thing, and do another thing. I think a lot of people, particularly with leaders, think they need to behave a certain way. When we try to train our leaders, a lot of it, there's best practices from a managerial standpoint, but it's actually a lot of helping them figure out their core values, their why, their strength finders. Like, who are you and how are you going to lead authentically, which is not the same as the person there is no cookie cutter type of leader. The best leader you could become is one who's actually authentic and leads from their values and is honest with their team about the type of leader that they are and what they value. I mean, there are other leaders who not that we have shared values, but they value different things. Like, leaders who have a core value of trust. Like, if you're 5 minutes late to a meeting, like, you're in the penalty box with them. You might not get out. Like, that's not me, but that's authentically who they are.
I love that. Yeah, you've got these aha moments coming out of everything you do. I want to take a word that you used, which was after action report versus postmortem report.
Yeah.
Why'd you choose? Tell me why you did after action.
AAR just comes from the military in terms of like kind of reviewing it. Postmortem always applies that something is dead. I think AAR would be good or bad. I don't know that they're that different, but I think it's really important. Again, when you make a mistake, we make a lot of mistakes. The goal is not to make the same mistake twice. And the way that you don't make the same mistake twice is figure out what went wrong, figure out who needs to know about it, figure out a process that changed. And let's not, I get really upset when we make the same mistake twice. To me, that's not learning. If you make it once because you got blindsided, great. Repeating the mistakes is where I get really frustrated.
But there must be it feels to me, maybe you had said it. It feels to me like using the postmortem means that it's dead. I guess that implies that you're not learning if it's already dead. I mean, it's a really interesting concept is when people do postmortems.
Yeah, I don't like. I never thought. I mean, I guess we don't do that many positive ones that have. But AAR comes from. I think after every military exercise, you regroup. I think whether it went well, whether it didn't go well, or other side, and you talk about again what worked, what didn't work, what you can learn from it. So, organizations could do both, right? Sometimes you do all the right things and it doesn't go well because it's lucky, bad luck or bad timing. Sometimes you do all the wrong things and it goes well. I actually think that's one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make. They look at the outcome, not. And I talked to Stanley McChrystal about this when I interviewed him. Not did the person make the best decision with what they knew at the time, because a lot of us get lucky, right? If your kid drove home drunk and didn't get arrested, you wouldn't tell them that that was a good decision. But we do the equivalent of that in business all the time, where someone made a stupid, risky decision and it worked out, and we celebrate them for that.
Yeah, interesting. It goes back to the people who are authentic and leading from their values, and then tying into whether or not the decisions made were based from their values, and did they get lucky or not, or did they actually was it the right thing to do?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you and I both know Gary, who just stepped down as the CEO of WD-40 last year. Like, if you believe in your values, he always has a saying that anyone at WD-40 that acts in concert with one or more of the company's values is safe, right? I don't know that many people. This is why, if you don't know your personal values, how do you know the decisions you're making are safe? And I don't know that many leaders of their company that are basically willing to say, you know, you don't have to consult our rule book. You have to consult our values for your behaviors, and you're totally safe if you make decisions under one or more of those. And I Gary Ridge always said that, and I thought it was pretty telling in terms of the type of culture he had built.
Now, is that similar to what you're doing at your firm, or is that something that you aspire to?
I think both. Yeah, I mean, I think I would much rather, I think values cover many more decisions than rules. So interesting. This is a total non sequitur, but my wife and I were really, recently doing some like estate planning stuff. And, we're like many people in insurance, we're just worth more dead than alive. And what we had seen was these letters that people write along, with their estate to their kids and the executor, sort of in terms of their values and their money and how they want it to be carried out, and they don't know whether it's going to be 20 years or, 2 years. And so we actually collected a bunch of these, and there were two types. I would say that there were prescriptive letters. Here's exactly what we want done. And there's kind of no end to that. Like, you can use it for college, you can do this, you can do, and there's just rules after rules for the thing. And then there are other people where it was just a values-based letter. You understand our values, you know what we would want, you know what we wouldn't want. These are the types of things we would want. And I just seemed like the prescriptive was like, once you started on it, it was like kind of managing from the grave, and, like the puppet strings, and the values were like, look, here are our guideposts, like, please live within them. And it was very interesting looking at the two sets of letters. I would say the minority were in the values, probably because people didn't have clear, strong values, but I just felt uncomfortable with some of the prescriptive ones.
Yeah. Although, it's always, when you're watching these movies, I'm sure that the letters could have been equally as powerful. When you're watching these movies and there's this prescription of stuff you have to do, like, where did that come from? That doesn't seem. So I'm curious. That's very fascinating, because you're doing this with your kids in mind, right? So if you've taught and lead
or their kids, in mind.
Or,
so,
right,
yeah.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. Right. And so then the question becomes, how have you brought that into your work, either as an executive coach or as CEO or board? Like, how do you bring that into business?
Yeah. So I have, as we have developed leaders over the years, I kind of built a process of, because I went and figured out my core values, but it was a lot of work. I realized I had to do it. Everything that people read in my bio, I always say is, so if I'm speaking, they will read all these accomplishments. They're all ACV, after core values, literally after I figured out my values. Like, there's a distinct line in my resume of before and after. But I had to go figure it out. And so, one of my sort of core values is figuring out a better way. So I built this curriculum. We tested on over 100 leaders. It worked really well to help them figure out their values. And then they would go back to their team. And there was just some huge epiphanies. I can tell you that most people's values particularly if they're strong, go directly to childhood, go to positive or negative formative experiences. And then when they make that connection and they see how this has been such a dominant force maybe in their life and their leadership, but they hadn't realized it, it's really interesting. And a lot of the really good leaders take that, go back to their team and say, look, this is what I learned about myself. This is how I work. This is how I operate. basically, this is how you can manage up to me. Not that leaders don't change, but your values aren't going to change. So again, I'll give you an example. That trust one comes up for a couple of leaders, like deep trust. And when I hear trust as a core value come up, or relationships that are based on trust, I've learned this. I will ask people, you don't have to answer, what it is for me, but did you have a core violation of trust in your childhood or somewhere? And usually they don't answer because I can see a well in their eye and a tear, and they get all choked up and they don't answer it. So, but how that manifests itself, and I alluded to this before, as a leader, is that when there's certain behaviors of people on your team, when they're late, when you can't find them at 2 p.m, when they tell you it's done Tuesday and Wednesday, it actually triggers like core visceral things in you that this is a person that cannot be trusted. And most of these leaders, when we walked through it, had a bunch of people on their team that they had put in a penalty box and they were not getting out. So having that awareness, being able to go back and have that discussion and saying, look, I'm someone for whom trust matters. Here's how I trust you until I don't trust you. And here are the ways that you could lose my trust really easily. And I want to make sure you know this, because these are my bright lines. Like, to me, that's authentic leadership. You're not going to change that person. This is something that's been with them since they were 5 years old. They can understand it. They can be aware of it. They can be met, but trust is not going to become not important to them.
And largely you're saying that it's because when they were young, there was something in their lives that caused them to want to focus on trust as a core value.
It didn't tell them to focus on trust. It became a core value. Right. They were either deeply entrusted with something, which is the rare case, or they were had a real violation of trust. Maybe a parent who left in the middle of the night or something like that. For whom this became their default mode of operating system. Right. There was someone who shared a story about, needing to make sense of situations, like a value of like needing to just diagnose and figure out, situations in real time. It was a really strong thing for them. And he told a story like he had a completely alcoholic stepfather who, every night when he came home, he had to decide, how bad is it? Do I get him to chase me? Who's he going to hit? I don't think people realize, these things become pretty ingrained in your default mode of operation later in life. And it shows up in your parenting. It shows up in your leadership. Right. So
I often find it's those people's superpower today is something they overcame when they were younger.
Yes. Purpose and pain have a direct connection. And I think there's some guilt. Like, people don't want to honor it. They don't want to realize, the example I always give is like, let's pretend that someone grew up in a single family household and their parent worked 3 jobs and put them through college, and they went to Harvard and they, incredibly successful. And they decide to start an after-school program. They start an award-winning after-school program because to help kids feel less lonely. In 95% of cases, they do not intellectually connect the fact that they went on to develop this global program to make kids less lonely to the fact that they were lonely as a kid, because they feel like that's disrespectful to the parent, or the parent. Like, the thing is, those things are incongruous. That parent did the best they could do. They did what they could do so that kid could go on to be successful. They are not honoring the fact that that's just how they felt. It has nothing to do with that their parent was a good parent or a bad. That was just their truth. And that's gone on, and that will probably stay with them. So again, it's usually a for or against. You had something and it was really important, or you didn't have something and you that was really important to you.
And how do you unravel that? I think you mentioned performing different sort of tests. How do you unravel that when you first start working with leaders?
Yeah, I built a series of questions that, similar to a lot of other assessments, like behavioral-based questions that ask you the same thing in different way, and pull out a bunch of different stories from your personal and professional life and high and lows. And when you actually take those stories and you organize them in the way that we laid it out, you taxonomize them, you realize what the themes are. And then the themes start breaking down into you'll realize you told the same story 3 different ways. And it's interesting as people start to dig into that. And again, the closer we get to, is this a theme? Say, hey, Mitchell, is there something about this that like, resonates for you or ties close to something? You'll start to hear those stories.
By the way, Robert, I want to see those questions. So if they're somewhere let me know. I'd like to, I'm very curious. Yeah. I've got 3 more questions. And the first one is, if somebody finds this really fascinating, how best should they reach out to you?
Yeah, I have everything's all in one place. So at robertglazer, glazer.com, that's where my books and podcast and my Friday Forward newsletter are. Yeah, there's the site right there. So very, very easy to find.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I signed up and you produce and share some good stuff, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So based on this conversation and what we've covered so far, is there a question that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Yeah. So, what am I, focused on now? Okay. So, or what maybe what's different with transitioning out of the CEO role?
Okay. That sounds great. Love that. So what's new? You've done, I think I started the conversation when we're in the green room. You've done some good stuff so far. Yeah. So what's next for Robert Glazer?
Well, I've been living a couple jobs for a few years, so I'm trying to just, maybe have close to a 40 or 50 hour work week for a while. But I'm leaning more into that leadership development and stuff, and writing and some of the stuff that became the night and weekend job, but I really had a lot of passion around. One of the things that's interesting, I'd always shared this analogy with my team when I was the CEO, that like a coach on a sports team or college sports team can never, I know you'll appreciate this, they can never go in the game. They can never cross the line. They have to instruct, teach, or whatever they're doing from the sidelines, versus way too often in the business world, people they just go take the ball out of someone's hands and do it. But as I've made this transition and I don't even have the authority to do those things anymore, it becomes even more of, how do you coach from the sidelines? How do you teach from the sidelines? Like, I don't even have the ability to grab the ball anymore. So I'm enjoying that, and it's forcing me to think about how to help leaders in different ways, particularly when they're coming in and looking for kind of advice and questions and problems and to be solved.
Robert, I love that. Oh, that's got my mind on a whole series of things. Yeah, that's awesome. I want to thank you. And before I do that, let me tell the folks that are still here and paying attention, we do have something really fascinating called the Ultimate Credibility Bootcamp. And we do that once a quarter. And I'd be honored to have you join us, where we actually help people first take a 1-hour course where you can then articulate who you are and how you serve in 10 words or less. And then you get to align yourself both synchronously when you're with somebody, just exactly how Robert showed up today. And if I have somebody interviewing on this show, they are credible. So it's showing up both synchronously and asynchronously. So when you're not in the room, do you show up properly? And so I'd love for you to go to that. It's just ultimatecredibilitybootcamp.com. Robert Glazer, this was amazing. I've got at least 5 aha messages that came out of this conversation. And a couple of them, maybe all of them, I'm going to sort of start indoctrinating into how I speak, and I'll give you credit for it because I'm a big fan of spreading cred. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Mitchell. If you want to steal one more thing, I heard a speaker once say, the first time I hear something, I give credit. The second time, I don't attribute it. And the third time, it's mine. So you can just take that.
Yeah, I try to give credit, but I hear you. And what I want to say, for those, I will spread cred dust of Robert Glazer. And for those who are listening and paying attention, this is now your time to spread cred dust. Click on the like button, share with your friends, take the aha moments that really resonate with you and share on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. And thanks again so much. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode of Leaders Living Their Values. Take care, everyone. Bye now.